In this final video, as mentioned in the previous one, I'm going to look at what happens if black allows white to imbalance the pawn structure with f takes g5. So the position was this, and now white plays f takes g5 with the plan of playing g4, taking on h5 and then pushing that h-pawn followed by checkmate. And this is worth studying this position for a bit and seeing what would you play as black here, and what do you think the correct result would be? Do you think black can put up resistance? Do you think he can actually hold a draw, or is it just a case of he can set a couple of traps for white? It's worth just taking a minute and thinking about that. I'm going to go on with the video now and assume that if you wanted to, you'd have paused the video and had a look. Now, the most natural move for black here would be to play f5, at least to my mind. However, that is a mistake, and now white actually wins the game. There are a number of moves that win, but so for example king g1 is a good move. Now whichever move black really plays here, white is ready in time to put the king, say, on e2, swap his e-pawn for black's f-pawn and push the g-pawn. So, for example, if white takes that, you can push this g-pawn. Now g6 followed by rook g8 mate is pretty much unstoppable unless black sacrifices this bishop. But now we have, okay, yeah, white should play rook h7 before king e3 to avoid stalemate. But then after that, we have a simply winning rook and pawn endgame. White will bully the king over here, followed by sacrificing for the h5 pawn, as shown in a previous series. So f takes e4 doesn't really help black, and if we say he moves the bishop, we'll simply make the same exchange, followed by moving up the g-pawn. Okay, black sacrifices, it's the same situation. You bully the king over, followed by sacrificing for the h5 pawn with a win. f4 is no different. You're just going to play g4, followed by putting the king on f1 and going for the mate, which black can only stop by sacrificing the bishop with a loss. So f5 doesn't hold for black. The key idea, it's not necessarily important to play it on the first move, but the idea is to put the bishop on this diagonal, the e1 to h4 diagonal. And it's a very good move, bishop e1. You could play bishop d2 and then after g4 play bishop e1. It's important that the bishop's on that square after g4, or on this diagonal after g4. White's only real way to make progress is to push that pawn, so you might as well get on with that. And now bishop f2 is, bishop g3 would also be fine, but just keeping that bishop there is the key, because it turns out that both of white's pawn moves here allow black to draw. Bishop takes h4 would be an error, because after g5 white is then going to block the h-pawn with the king and then sacrifice the rook for the e5 pawn with a win. So like such, forcing the kings to connect and then sacrificing. He could have forced the king over to the queen side as well. It doesn't really make much odds. It's a win either way. And if white takes this way, then push on. Black might think that he can block on the h6 square, but after a check it becomes clear that he's getting mated. So bishop f2, very, very good move. Now I managed to find one possibility for white to try to keep the game going, maybe introduce a few more tricks. If he was to take on h5, the game's pretty much a draw already, because after bishop takes h4 followed by f5, it ends up being white can't make progress. f5, king f2. Now f4 would be a terrible blunder, because then white would be able to target the e5 pawn later, so black should eliminate that. And after this position, it's actually not possible for the rook to win. You can play around with this position, but you can't force the king outside of sort of 2 ranks from the edge of the board. Try to force it next to the pawn somehow, but it just doesn't work. It'll just go on, and black is drawing. Apart from g takes h5, you could try g5, maybe thinking that those pawns there on the h file will help you. But after f takes g5, we're actually back into a symmetrical position again, which is what black had to start with and made a mistake getting out of. So now he can just move his bishop around and white can't make progress. The idea I found was to move this rook back around and try and sacrifice for the bishop in favourable circumstances. Then you have to start calculating king and pawn endgames, but it turns out that black can pretty much draw this without much difficulty. So rook d7, black should probably take the opportunity to put the king out, and then rook d1. So white's idea is that if black's a bit careless, say king h8, it turns out that after rook takes e1, white is actually winning the endgame. Just a couple of lines to demonstrate that. So king h7, king g2, king g7, take this, and after king f2, white wins the pawn race. There are some other lines there, but it's not so important to analyse them all out. It's just that mentioning that black does have to be a little bit careful, and now king g7 is a more natural move anyway, now that the rook has vacated the 7th rank to kind of put that king forward. And now if white takes on e1, then after f5, white really has to capture g takes f5 with a draw. Therefore, that's not really making progress. The only idea I found here was to put the king over onto d3. Put the king onto d3 and improving the king position, so it's now ready if black was to play f5 after the rook sacrificed for the bishop, to play e takes f5, and so the king position is slightly improved over there. The idea being like rook g1. This is shows white's idea if black plays bishop f2 to take here with check, and then win the king and pawn endgame, like so. Black should be a little bit more careful than that and simply move the king to the side, gaining a tempo so that now g takes h5 isn't with check. Now with g takes h5, you can play bishop takes h4 and secure that same drawn position that we saw earlier. Rook g8, hoping for rook f8 check, but I mean black has to move, so you're never going to get that in. f5, king e2, hoping for f4, f takes e4, king e3, e4, and white's maximised his winning chances, or given black the most opportunity to go wrong, but black has managed to avoid all those pitfalls and secure a draw. This is kind of an atypical situation. Usually when the pawn structure leaves symmetry, like black allowed white to play f takes g5 at the beginning of the game, if I just scroll back to that position, usually that would be fatal and black wouldn't be able to survive the messed up pawn structure. But this is quite an interesting case to analyse, to show that even when that happens, sometimes, strong defence can save the game, but black really shouldn't have put himself in that position in the first place. That's the end for this series. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'm planning on making another series looking at kind of expert level endgames, so hopefully when that comes out you'll enjoy that as well.